And good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're watching. Thank you for tuning in for another episode on the Amazic podcast. I'm Twain Taylor, editor at Amazic. And if you like what you hear here, and if you're interested in what we talk about, I want to encourage you to head over to amazic.com, our website, where we've got a whole bunch of stuff like articles and job listings and event coverage, a lot of stuff that you can go through. So definitely head there. And today we're going to be talking with someone really interesting and from a company that's been around and has been innovating for a while, been reinventing itself, and is quite a name in the space of cloud computing and cloud native computing. We're going to be talking to Lee Caswell, who is the Senior VP of Product and Solutions Marketing at Nutanix. Lee, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining. How are you doing?
Good, Twain, and thanks so much for having us and having me here. It's exciting to talk about this subject.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to, there's so much that Nutanix does. Pretty much everything cloud end to end. It seems to cover. But we had to have a focus for our conversation today. So so I picked multi-cloud for our conversation. Yeah. And I think that's something as well that Nutanix is, just recently been focusing on and been innovating in. So I'm really curious to get your views on this, Lee. But before we get to that, just want to get to know you a bit. And just wondering if you could tell us a bit about yourself and your background, what you've been up to before Nutanix, and then how many years here. If you get us started talking about yourself first, that'd be great.
Yeah, you bet. So I joined Nutanix a little bit over a year ago. Came here from VMware. So, had spent 5 years at VMware with some of the really innovation, early days of hyperconverged, right? With vSAN, for example. Also working on vSphere and VCF, right? The VMware Cloud Foundation. So, great background from that standpoint. I think for that phase one of the market, and we'll talk about how, here we're doing phase two. And then, before that, I was at NetApp for 2 years doing all flash arrays. And you'll see a lot of all flash background. Prior to that, I was at Fusion.io, was an early flash company, right? Providing flash in servers. NetApp was providing flash in, storage systems. And then, as you go to HCI, you're really looking at flash reimagining how you can build scale out clustered systems. And that's one of the things that's really, always intrigued me is, architectural choices, architectural differences, right? Really set kind of the degrees of freedom you have for your architecture to go and enable new use cases, right? Or they can limit you as well, right? So that's one of the things that's got a lot of my interest in even and what we'll talk about today.
Sounds like a lot of background in storage and architecture that you bring. And, it'd be really interesting to hear some of your thoughts because it comes with a lot of experience and just you've seen a lot. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you and all of on this topic of multi-cloud. But when we think of multi-cloud, right, one of the recent few years, the big conversation has been around Kubernetes, containers, sure. And what this has enabled, for multi-cloud. And if you could get us started talking about what does Kubernetes and containers mean for multi-cloud, what has it enabled and why it's a good thing? And to start off on a positive note, why is multi-cloud good? Why does an organization need multi-cloud?
Yeah, well, I think, if you look back in the last kind of 5 years, right, you started thinking about cloud development was happening independent of what was happening in a infrastructure environment. In many cases, partly because of the pandemic, right? There were supply chain issues and other things. And also, the cloud turned out to be a way to develop applications quickly, right? And so people were looking at that from a speed standpoint, where when you looked at infrastructure and like on-premises infrastructure, you basically had teams that were more focused on things like enterprise resiliency and operational day two operations, right? Or compliance issues. And so these were actually really kind of independent almost, right? A little bit like we used to call shadow IT, if you remember back in that time. And so as we started thinking about these, many customers all of a sudden woke up after the pandemic and said, wow, they've inherited an accidental hybrid or multi-cloud environment. they're running, they've got applications running over here. They maybe acquired a company that's got something running in GCP, for example. Now they've got a AWS piece. They've got their own on-premises folks. And these were all happening independently. And now what's happening is people are starting to look and say, hey, is there an opportunity to go and have some element of commonality so that I don't have to have separate teams? And it's particularly true for data people, right? Because data people know that it's impractical to think about centralizing all your data. And it's also risky, right, to do. And so the idea that you'll have distributed environments. Now, the reason I'm leading into this is once you had S3, right, opened up as a standard, you now had a way to go and start thinking about how might I go and have data that would go and move across these hybrid or multi-cloud environments. And just for definitional purposes, I consider hybrid to be on-premises or edge to one cloud, where multi-cloud is a superset of that, where I would now have multiple clouds going across, right? And so you start thinking about like, oh, wait, well, how might I do that? So S3 provided an opportunity for data. Similarly, Kubernetes, right, as an open standard, became a way for applications to become more portable over this environment. And so these became standards, right, that we can start free riding on really effectively to start looking at how might you move data and applications across the cloud. And kind of next up would be, why might you do that? And what would be the ways that you'd classify applications and data?
Right. All right. Yeah, I like how you're explaining each of those terms even because there can be a lot of different definitions that different people have. So, so continuing from that, I want to ask about the other side of it, which is, so there's definitely so much possibilities that open up because of Kubernetes and S3 and how you can have distributed data and apps. But on the other side, what are the challenges? And you probably hinted at it when you spoke about you want consistency when you're managing operations. If you could, tell us a bit more about the challenges.
Yeah, people are looking at this closely when they ask the first question is security. Because as soon as you start opening up, let's say a data center, for example, right? Or you've got healthcare data, for example, or you've got AI data that you consider proprietary, for example, and you start thinking, golly, how am I going to have this open up across like a hybrid environment first, or even to a multi-cloud environment? So the number one issue really becomes security, and start thinking about how do I have an integrated security stack? Because what you find out is people are investing in security, but getting hacked more, right? So you got more of these kind of proliferation of products. So the idea that we've come up with here is that if you can have integrated security, stretched security, use your own, access to your own tools, for example, and have integrated what we call VPCs, right? That would be a network that stretches in security purposes from your on-prem to a cloud provider. Now all of a sudden I've got built-in security at the infrastructure layer. And then you go up the next level and say, okay, well, what about at the data and applications layer? Can I start thinking about integrated security there for encryption at rest, for example, or encryption in flight? Or how do I think about things like embedded ransomware protection? So now you've started thinking about putting security in at every level of the stack. And that becomes possible if you've got a common stack running across these different endpoints from the edge to the data center into public cloud providers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So security is huge. I'd like to tease it out a bit more. If you could talk a bit more apart from security as well, what are some of the other challenges that you see when it comes to operational challenges?
Yeah, well,
anything that comes to your mind?
The second one becomes, well, if I've got different cloud and endpoint devices, I might want to go and start thinking about how I'm going to optimally locate my data and applications over time. And so we're talking to a lot of customers about how do you do that? So historically, what we've done is we've talked about performance, right? About data sovereignty. Where is your data? Who can subpoena your data, right? Who has access to your data? And then also cost. And cost has come up in a major way as companies are talking about FinOps. You've heard about this, right? Is they're now evaluating and taking a look. Now that we're in a tighter economic environment, number one. Number two, money's not free, right? Now that you have those two elements, people are starting to look at how might I optimally locate data and applications over time? And I might want to move them for any of those three reasons, right? geopolitical events happen. Well, I might want to move my data right into a safer location, for example. Or I've got cost differences where people are now taking a hard look at, if I actually know what I'm going to run, I can run it pretty cost effectively, really cost effectively in an on-prem environment, right, of buy versus renting in the cloud. And so now we've got people thinking, well, I might want to start moving these applications over time. So that second element of how flexible is it to be able to move? And it turns out, right, if you have a common operating model, or identical in Nutanix's case, it's identical, you can move applications and data at your pace, and it's backed up by portable licenses. That means I can take a license that's running over here and I can move it right into an on-prem world or into another cross-cloud providers. You're not going to see that coming from any cloud provider. There's not a single cloud provider that's going to help you facilitate moving your data out of one cloud to another cloud, right? And yet we have the capability now to offer that, so you can start doing arbitrage on cost, for example, or start thinking about where you locate something if you wanted to go and set up a new application and not wait for physical infrastructure to catch up. And so that helps you start thinking about a consistent, identical operating model backed up by portable licenses, gives you the flexibility to go and move them now that you have S3 and Kubernetes, right, as standards to make it possible from a application and data standpoint.
All right. Some really interesting points that you spoke about FinOps and cost, which is one of the main motivators for wanting to repatriate all of your infrastructure. But it's not as easy, right? And it's not like you just lift and shift and then, it runs the same on-premise like it used to run in the cloud. And there's just so much more operational overhead that you need to consider. What's the experience that you see organizations having as they, let's say they make this decision, let's take a lot of our infrastructure in-house, let's manage it ourselves, the cloud is too expensive. What's some of the real world experiences that you see out there?
Well, I was at a very large educational facility. So one of the largest educational college in Texas, for example. And I was actually watching a mainframe app running on Nutanix, right, with an all-flash system, right, where they've taken and basically just done translation layer to go and take a 3270 app, for example. And so you start thinking about, why do all these older apps, why are there apps on mainframes, and why are there apps on Unix? And what does it mean to refactor and replatform an app? It's a big lift. And that's what a lot of companies realized when they started looking at, hey, if I wanted to go to the cloud, right, refactoring and replatforming apps took a long time. Similarly, if I have cloud-driven apps, like how might I move those? So what we've got here is the ability to apply technology to this. And what you can find is, what are the commonalities across the public cloud and an on-prem environment? Well, if you move to our hyperconverged infrastructure platform, right, you're now running software on top of standard servers. Now I can start thinking standard servers are running on-prem, they're running in the public cloud, and they can run at the edge. So the commonality now says, once you standardize on a server-based scale-out system, so you eliminate the proprietary hardware, right? That could be like fiber channel infrastructure or classic SAN technologies, right? That were separate individual items. All of this, right? I talked about my enthusiasm for Flash, right? It's now possible to have extremely low latency, all NVMe devices running as nodes that give you performance for even the most performant databases with integrated snapshots, disaster recovery based on replication, right? All of that's possible today, and you can run it commonly across the public cloud. So we have customers who were looking to accelerate time to get, let's say they were trying to consolidate data centers, and they wanted the ability to run an application that they were already running on-prem and run it in the public cloud. With Nutanix, you can take that same application, and we've got something called the Move tool, and allows you to just simply go and move it, right? And you can run it without any refactoring or replatforming, right? It's just rehosting, right? So you're just moving the same app. So the idea that you've got the ability to run the same applications and the same data and move it like across the public cloud environments is really revolutionizing the idea that now I've got this new way to think about how a hybrid multi-cloud can reimagine your business. I'll give you one more example quickly, right? So business continuity, right? Business continuity has normally been, I could go from an on-prem environment to another data center, or, I could go and snapshot something to the cloud, for example. The idea now that I could go and take snapshots, put them perhaps in the cloud or any S3 compatible target, and rehydrate wherever Nutanix is running. It gives you that level of flexibility where you start thinking, hey, I can do this in a different way and take advantage of some of the cost opportunities there once I move to a standard platform.
Wow, so much to unpack in there. I wanted to just start with some of the terms.
Sure.
One is, you briefly also mentioned this earlier, multi-cloud, what it means. Is there a difference between multi-cloud and having multiple clouds?
Right.
How do you explain those? And two, another important term that you just mentioned, hyperconverged infrastructure, which is really key to what Nutanix does. So if you could kind of get these definitions in place for us.
Yeah, let me help with that. So what hyperconverged infrastructure improved on was, instead of having a separate storage system, right? And storage systems, have been well proven over the years. They've got an architecture that looks like an HA pair design generally, right? You've got an HA pair design of controllers that are protecting separate storage elements. And that was usually a subsystem to servers that were running someplace else, mostly virtualized these days. And because the storage needed low latency, as this connection was separate and off to the side, you had a dedicated storage network called fiber channel, right? That was standard. What hyperconverged did was it said, hey, listen, there's over 10,000 servers being sold a day. All the new technology, new CPUs, new RAM, right? New flash devices, NVMe flash devices, new networking technologies based on Ethernet are all coming to servers. So if I had software that was smart enough, I could aggregate these servers together, right? You start with a minimum of 2 or 3, and then you could scale those up. What hyperconverged infrastructure does is it aggregates the storage devices across these servers into a single pool of storage first. And then it allows you to run virtualized servers instances on each individual server so they can float across this persistent store of record. And the idea was that, you could tolerate any node failures with very simple design right from that standpoint, and it became really easy to scale. So instead of having to predict what I needed 5 years out, I could say, listen, I'll buy what I need for this year, and I can just add to this, and I can flexibly add to the storage and compute capabilities that are there. So it was a very flexible way. And importantly, it allowed generalists to participate in a world that was operated by specialists. A little bit like, you're a professional photographer almost with your phone, right, these days, because you don't have to know about f-stops, and you don't have to know about like film, and these things are very complicated. So that was hyperconverged infrastructure. Let me stop there just for a second and see does that make sense in terms of how we revolutionize that space?
Yeah. I think that's a great explanation for hyperconverged infrastructure. Yeah.
Now, once you're on servers, now the idea was, well, I could start thinking about the same software that we offer today for running in an on-prem environment. We've jointly engineered the ability to run our stack in bare metal instances on Azure and on AWS. And that means customers can take their own existing credits, existing discounts, right, that they have for Azure or for AWS, and deploy our software on those bare metal nodes. And what that allows you to do is to have now an extended hybrid cloud environment if you do one, or you could do a multi-cloud environment if you do two, right? Where I can start thinking about moving data and applications at time. I'll give you some examples of why would people want to do that. So we have some customers who are, Land's End is a big retailer here, for example, who in the holiday seasons wants to spin up virtual desktops in a multi-cloud environment and do that for 3 to 4 months, let's say. And then the holiday season is over here in the US at least, right? And so we'll then turn those off, spin those down, right? And retreat back, if you will, right down to what they're running on an ongoing basis, right? So they're paying for the things that they need on a continuing basis, and then renting the piece that's sporadic or bursty or, is based on a specific time frame. And so that gives you a really flexible way to start thinking about, I'm basically doing peak workload management and tapping into the cloud when I have things that are more spontaneous. Make sense?
Yeah. So I see, it started off with data, but does it have implications also for things like compute and other things, networking, for example? Those aspects, how does hyperconverged infrastructure affect those aspects of cloud?
Yeah, it started off, this is one of the reasons, could be, I think, the best career spot in the world, right? Because you have to know a little bit about everything. You have to know about server infrastructures, because we're tapping into those to provide this large scalable pool of very fast storage. So that's one.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know a little bit about the compute elements, right? Because now we're running a hypervisor. Now, in our case at Nutanix, the hypervisor can be our own hypervisor, right? Or we also support either, the ESXi, which is a VMware hypervisor, or Hyper-V. So you can run the VMs, right, in a traditional way that, based on the tool set that you're familiar with from that standpoint. So that's first. Now, the next piece becomes kind of more, I would say, breaking edge or leading edge, right? Is now the idea of not having cloud only properties, but thinking about how do I have an integrated model across the hybrid cloud. It's actually relatively new thinking, right? And so we're making it possible because it's very simple, right? It's exactly the same operational model that you have in an on-prem world. You don't have to learn new tools or anything, right? To go and basically tap into having an extended, connected version of how you run in the public cloud. So that, I think, is the way that you help facilitate this without it becoming overwhelming.
All right. Yeah, so, we touch on different aspects of multi-cloud, hyper-converged infrastructure.
Sure.
And going back from, back in the day to now, tracing it. And, I want to come to, segue to talking a bit about Nutanix and what it does. And, if you can give us kind of the brief elevator pitch of
Sure.
How does Nutanix fit into this whole conversation? What does it enable? And you've obviously dropped a lot of hints already. I was quite excited hearing about the move tool that you mentioned. I want to follow up on that in a bit.
Right.
But for now, just give us the elevator pitch of Nutanix. Yeah,
so at the top level, we give you one platform to run data and apps anywhere.
All right.
And that's, as you start thinking about it, you start thinking, oh, well, okay, where does anywhere mean? So anywhere for many customers meant, oh, I could run the same apps that I have in an on-premises environment, and I could run those in the public cloud without rehosting, replatforming. So that was interesting, right? That extend to the cloud, but also meant you could extend to the edge. Now, we're seeing analysts come and talk about, half of the data that's going to be generated over the next 3 years is going to be generated at the edge, because it turns out like sensors generate data faster than humans. So you're going to have more data coming in, and we're going to watch new applications, particularly AI ML, right? Mm-hmm. We've seen the enthusiasm for AI ML, and how is AML going to evolve? You're going to have AI ML, basically training of models in the cloud, deployment at the edge. So the idea now from a, elevator pitch, a little long for an elevator pitch, but is now once I have moved to a server-based system, I can now extend what I'm doing from the public cloud all the way out to the edge. Now, there's an important thing to consider on the edge also, right? Is that the edge needs to run when it's untethered from the cloud. Mm-hmm. That's an important element.
Yeah.
And watching, because there's certainly been cloud out models that have been proposed, right? AWS has Outpost, Google has Anthos, Azure has Azure Arc, right? But the concept, right, is those are always basically so far have been running, they have to be connected to the cloud. And that's a problem when you're running a manufacturing facility or a retail environment, right? Or, I don't know, a toll booth or something, right? You don't want those operations to cease if the cloud connection, right, that umbilical cord to the cloud is somehow not cut. Turns out HCI generally, and Nutanix specifically, right, run in an untethered manner so they can connect up later and can operate independently. So this whole idea of how you start thinking about that, the elevator pitch, right, still the same, right, which is one platform to run data and apps anywhere, now gives you that full flexibility to say, I can go and run at the edge, I can go run in the data center, and I can run in the public cloud.
Yeah, that's quite powerful because and it seems like Nutanix has its sights set on not just today but what's coming up. You mentioned AI ML, you mentioned the edge, which for a lot of organizations they're just getting started with edge computing, and there's just so many new use cases that crop up by the day.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you think about, if you think about the edge, right? So the thing about edge, right, is every edge location is kind of different, right? So if it's a retail environment or a manufacturing facility, right, or a wind farm, right, or an ingest site for, I don't know, blower and chiller information, right, or jet engines, you're going to have different requirements. So it turns out, right, this architecture that we have is ideally suited for scaling down, right, to smaller environments, which becomes important for cost. If you're deploying something across 200 manufacturing sites, right, or 2,000 retail environments, all of a sudden cost really matters, right? So thinking about how you get down to lower costs is important. And you're also start thinking about, well, that AI model says, I want to be able to run models cost effectively at the edge and then process the data close to where the data is coming in. Like data people know that you can't send all the data centrally back. It just takes, it's not fast or free to do that. And if you put all the data in the cloud, then you're going to have to pay to take it out as well. So people are starting to think about, listen, what I thought maybe 5 years ago was that I was going to have a single cloud destination. Now what I know to be true is I have multi-cloud properties, accidental multiple clouds. And if I could get to a multi-cloud operating model, I can actually get a lot of leverage.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. And I want to dig into asking more about how this works a little bit under the hood, just how do you make this possible, this portability and the consistency. But if you could, tell us a bit about this recent product release that you had as well that enables this, Nutanix, Nutanix Central, I think is what it's called. If you could tell us a bit more about that recent release of yours and what it enables, that'd be great.
Yeah. In fact, I thought what I might do is show you a quick. Let's take a look here. There we go. Let me pull this up and share. We did an announcement. We had our user conference just last month. And what was interesting there is share. Just give me a thumbs up. You can see that. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. And so we announced, one of the announcements we had at our .next conference was something called Nutanix Central. And Nutanix Central was the idea that you'd have a cloud delivered management control plane to go and start looking at a federated view of this newly distributed environment. So it's really future looking in the idea that, hey, it's not enough to have like a single data center view, right? And we do have a management tool for that, for what we call clusters of these servers in individual data centers. That's called Prism Central. And so you've got local control, right? Now, you want to retain that local control. It's important because you want to make sure that, the control of an individual cluster is not dependent on a cloud management control plane. But as you start thinking about, well, now I've got, let's say, 10 different sites and maybe 20 of my Prism Central clusters to go manage, it's really important to start thinking about how do I manage those at scale, right? And you remember, like in the early days of VMware, right? I mean, there was no vCenter. vCenter evolved, right, as a way to go and how do you manage VM sprawl in that case? Well, we're talking a little bit about like sprawl now happening at the cluster level across the hybrid multi-cloud environment. And so this is a really forward way of thinking of how do I go and monitor, manage, get alerts, right? And monitor. So that idea, and you can see like, federated environments, which could be, let's say, a edge or a public cloud or a data center. And so as you start thinking about, what does that mean? So for Nutanix Central in this case, right? The idea of having a multi-cloud control plane, a single pane of visibility, right? The support across different public cloud providers. You can almost think of that as a cross-cloud management model, right? Because you've got our stack effectively running on different multiple clouds. And then this idea of a consolidated view. So that's, first off. And then secondly is this idea of how do I get, the identical experience? And this is where we're helping customers who are, frankly, starting to look and say, how am I going to manage this? If I have a separate team for Google and a separate team for Amazon and a separate team for AWS, a separate team for my on-prem environment and separate teams for Edge, all of a sudden, I've got a lot of people just focused on maintenance, right? And the maintenance activities get in the way of what people are really trying to do with infrastructure in the first place, which is develop and support new applications. Right? Applications are this lifeblood of new competitiveness. And so, the idea of this is to go and give you this central experience and then an idea of how do you get enterprise cloud governance. And that's going to really help as you start thinking about how do I manage and make sure that I'm effectively utilizing my kind of multi-cloud environment. And through the move tool, of course, you can go move things right as you need to, as you start thinking, hey, I've looked at this for the second half. I think we're going to rebalance over here, right? And here's how I'm going to go and do it. And if you have flexibility and portability, it all becomes possible.
So actually interesting. And I think the move tool as well opens up arbitrage possibilities, like you mentioned, just save on costs. But, for someone listening to this and thinking, my costs are already high with running, on-premise and on multiple cloud locations. And then if I add something like Nutanix on top of this, and there's another cost for that, am I really fixing things or am I adding more complexity?
Right.
What would you say to someone thinking that way?
Well, so it's interesting that, if you looked at the public cloud environments and said, hey, I've got a, cloud native stack, let's call it, right, for sake of argument. And you're like, hey, if I put the Nutanix stack on, it seemed like it would cost more, right? That'd be the natural kind of response, right? So there's two actually sources of value that say that we can be up to half the cost of a public cloud native environment. And let me describe why. So first off is the fact that we're running on bare metal nodes in each of the public cloud providers, which are less costly than fully managed nodes that you would otherwise get, right? For VMs delivered by the cloud provider. So that's first, right? So you've got this economic source of value.
How much of a difference approximately are we talking about?
Good question. It depends. So it depends on your on the licenses, what your negotiated discounts
are. They all have different pricings anyway.
Yeah. So, but of the 50% we offer, probably like, I would say 25% of that comes from the bare metal node versus a managed node, right? Of that. So a quarter of the 50% savings. That's pretty important, right? And so that was not a casual thing. I mean, you can go search on Azure bare metal, for example, and you'll see that there are two companies that have built solutions based on this, Nutanix and SAP. And so this is co-engineered work because we had to integrate with ExpressRoute. And we integrated with ExpressRoute to make sure that you had a stretched network and security across these environments. So that was an important source of value, right? A technical investment on both companies, right? As a joint source of value there. So, so that's an initial part of the value proposition. Now, the second piece of value is interesting in that the instances that you buy from the cloud are what we call t-shirt sizes, right? And they give you fixed amounts of compute, storage, RAM, and network, right? And you buy them on individual instances and you deploy them across individual instances. What Nutanix does is we now run virtualization across those instances. And so you get all the values of virtualization applied to the cloud instances. And so we have a TCO tool that you can provide your applications to us. Now, it does require sufficient scale, right? If it's just, if you have 2 VMs, then you're not going to be able to virtualize across instances. But, for 50 or more VMs, let's say, right? You can go and we'll show you how you can virtualize across those, oversubscribe the CPU, take advantage of the shared resources across those instances. And we'll be able to go, that's how we get the other 3/4 of the value that we have, is to go and show that we can give you a virtualized instance across bare metal nodes that otherwise you would have inappropriate, like not ideally configured instances by themselves.
Really interesting. And what about performance in this case, since it's virtualized? There's a virtualized layer.
Sure.
Is there any performance hit at all, or how is Nutanix ensured to make sure that performance stays on par?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Because there's always a performance impact of virtualization, right? As a layer, software layer, right? It's an abstraction layer. You're going to go and pay for some of that. What I would suggest is this, right? That the virtualization benefits in terms of management, right, appealed first off to less performant workloads, just like in compute, by the way, right? The first applications that were virtualized in compute were not performant applications. They were DHCP servers, print servers, file servers, right? Low performance elements. What you found though was over 5 years in the computing sense, right? All of a sudden people look to go and put performant databases in, and not probably the ultimate performance database, because many times there you have got experts who will do kind of tuning, and those folks don't like sharing anything, and hyperconverged is the ultimate sharing environment, right, if you will. But we have the same dynamic, right, which is databases are now the #1 workload running on Nutanix HCI. And the reason why is you've got all of the data protection that you would expect anyway, snapshots, replication. You've got integrated security, and you've got the ability to go and have management across cloud. So I think to answer your question directly, right, we're seeing, sub-millisecond latency for databases during failure conditions. And that's really what you want to look at when you're in a, performance world, is what does a system look like during failure conditions. And so that we think is, really for applications of all types, it basically hits the sweet spot for where I can get performance that's sufficient, data services required, and have it be managed consistently across the hybrid cloud.
Yeah, I want to talk a bit about consistency that you mentioned. So the move tool sounds really exciting. Be able to take an application without refactoring, re-architecting, and move it to a different cloud sounds really promising and really powerful. And so there's that. So moving it, but then beyond even the migration or the moving of the app, what about maintenance itself? Because when the different clouds, they have their own nuances, and how does maintenance work when you're moving an app through Nutanix? Does Nutanix help in any way with the maintenance part of it when things go wrong?
Yeah, it does. And let me start within the on-premises world and just start when people move to hyperconvergence. What they realize quickly, right, is the ability to remain in a secure patch state improves dramatically, because with Nutanix, there's what we call one-click upgrades. One-click upgrades update the entire stack, including network, compute, storage, and even down to the firmware and IO controller inside of individual servers. Now, contrast that with a system that has what we call a classic, like 3-tier storage architecture. That means I'd have to patch the storage system. I'd have to patch the fiber channel network system separately, the compute separately. I've got, in many cases, right, the firmware and IO controller are independently patched from the virtualization layer, right? So this basically means that when you are on like under duress to go and move quickly to get to a patch state, right? Hyperconvergence like helps you dramatically there in terms of getting everything up to a secure state. Now, when you move to the hybrid cloud environment, well, now you're able to take all of those patches available, right, in any like upgrades. And the single difference there is that when you get down to things like firmware and IO controllers, those are managed by the cloud vendors directly. And so there you're basically being given bare metal updated environments. Those are managed by the cloud provider. We're managing all the other elements of the stack.
Awesome. The move tools, one-click updates, sounds like convenience is really a top priority for Nutanix. That's really interesting. If I could ask about security, because you mentioned this as one of the key challenges with multi-cloud, what's Nutanix's views on security for multi-cloud and hyperconverged infrastructure, and how does it simplify security in any way, just as it simplifies migration and maintenance and updates? Could you tell us a bit about Nutanix's approach to security?
Yeah, and what's interesting, I think, for many customers, right, is they've got different security across even different storage architectures. So for most companies, right, there's block storage, which is how many customers like run databases and other things. They also have file storage, right, which could be from NetApp or Isilon or other companies, right? Those have separate security settings. They also have separate snapshot technologies, right, and restore technologies. In fact, if you start buying different block file object systems, every one of those is separately protected, separately, has separate like snapshot recovery tools. So one of the simplification things that we do is we've got a common integrated snapshot and replication for all storage protocols. And that's important for a lot of customers because it's becoming hard to plan around what you might use. So most customers have blocks, right? Those are really performance oriented. They have files, right? And those files are for user data, right? We support both of those with a common structure. And then many customers are looking at objects thinking, maybe I'm not directly using objects on-prem yet. Some people are, some people are not, but I think I will over the next 5 years because they're watching how objects, right, are becoming now a new use case for applications, right? So new applications are, increasingly moving away from blocks into either files or objects directly. So one of the things that's interesting is how do I plan? How do I plan around that? Oh, so from a security standpoint, I've got to think, well, if I have to buy different architectures, I would have different utilization rates, and I would have different ways to go and snapshot and restore my data. If you move to Nutanix, for example, now I've got one architecture, and you can actually move it across your blocks, files, and objects. And you can go and basically say, well, listen, I think I'm going to need this, but if I need to use something else, I just go and use it for files, for example, instead of objects. And so I've got this now all integrated. So I get back to your question directly on security, because now the security that's integrated at the infrastructure layer is all about, we have embedded security at rest, security for data in flight. And we've also got something called micro-segmentation that works for the network layer. And that basically allows you to think about, how do I make sure that any unauthorized access is not able to proliferate across subnets, for example, or across network domains. And so micro-segmentation is a way that's built in Nutanix to help give you protection at the infrastructure layer, right? And so you've got network, software, and then of course for the compute element, you've got all the traditional access control methods and things like that. So what it comes back to is, listen, security is complicated, but the ability to have a common security system and method applied across storage, compute, networking, across files, objects, and blocks, and across on-prem and hybrid multi-cloud environments, all of a sudden that gives you the ability to say, I've got one way to go and measure and monitor that. right? So that's that built-in security element. I'll add one last thing, basically, because I think it's important. It's got a lot of people interested. Is we have something called integrated ransomware protection. It's a product that's part of the portfolio called Nutanix Data Lens. And Data Lens started out as looking at kind of file analytics, so you could see hotspots, for example, right? But what we found was that now we could train it to look for up to 5,000 different ransomware attack patterns. So that you can start looking and saying, hey, file access, if I looked at like create, delete, create activity or encrypt activities, things like that, we can do very fast detection of anomalies in terms of access patterns and then notification. And so, you've seen, it's, I think, a really exciting way for us to say that you've got this integrated way to increase or speed up the detection of elements. And then when you have our integrated snapshots and replication, now you've got the fallback to say, if I did have an event, right, and we'll notify you of that, now I can go back through the snapshots and I can consistently go and recover, right, because those are fully integrated. So, that's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but you get to see that security at every element of the stack is an important part of how we think about making sure that you're protected consistently, so you're able to get some leverage instead of having all these individual point products that are really difficult to go manage.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of detail in that answer. So yeah, seems like a lot of points on security that you mentioned, the snapshots, and you mentioned micro-segmentation, really interesting, the perimeterless security that we talk about, and finally the ransomware protection. So it seems like, there are quite a few like these, and yeah, so thanks for that. Time's really flown by and we're almost at the end of our conversation, but it was really interesting talking to you about all of these different technologies and just getting your views on how they've evolved and where we are right now and where we're going. And where we're going is my last question for you,
Sure.
which is about AI and ML that you mentioned. And it's still on the horizon, but some of it is already here. We're just at the start, though. Want to ask about AI and ML and Nutanix's efforts on that front. One, in terms of, are there any efforts to integrate AI and ML? The opportunities that AI and ML affords, to integrate that in the Nutanix platform. Are there any efforts on that front? And secondly, is there any concerted effort that Nutanix is taking to sort of position itself to better serve those AI ML workloads that are going to be increasing? That's a question that I want to ask.
It's a great question, right? So we see that AI ML is going to infiltrate every, type of business, right? And, how it happens and how it happens responsibly, right? It's, being worked out, as you can tell. But there are some things that, let's start about some of the basics, right? As you prepare for being able to add AI ML, right? Many people start thinking about, well, what does it mean to run AI ML applications? So here's a couple of things to think through, right? One is there's two workflows, we call them, right, that are really becoming standardized around AI ML as starting points. One is called NLP, or natural language processing, right? And you start thinking about, how do I do natural language processing for smart chatbots or things like that, right? To go and have more kind of quicker engagement without expertise, right? That's by people directly, right? And so NLP is a big one. Also, a video, right? And how I go and look at video, whether, it could be for fraud detection, right? Or shrink protection inside of retail environments, right? So thinking about those environments. So if you take those and then start thinking, well, how are those applications built? Well, mostly they're new applications with a lot of dependencies. So they're dependencies because there's training going on many times in the cloud, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because you got very large data sets and you kind of want to rent that, train it, turn it off, right? So the training the model happens. But then the portability means I'm going to go run those in different locations across the edge, where the data center could be an edge. So the idea that these are naturally container-based means you want to be picking a platform that naturally supports containers, right? And so this is one of the really, a nice another nice benefit of the Nutanix platform is we take just what you get for traditional VMs, and we've also supported then container interfaces. So that started with something called CSI, was a container storage interface, or COSI, C-O-S-I, is container object storage interface. So we support both of those today, right? So you could have those. And we announced something called Nutanix Data Services for Kubernetes. And that's interesting because that means that you're taking the same elements of data protection, snapshots, replication, DR, that's available for VMs today. And those are now available for containers, and particularly for what we call stateful containers. Probably the topic of another podcast would be interesting. But we see more stateful containers as people are containerizing existing applications. So the reason I'm bringing this up is, as you start thinking about AI, ML coming, what's it going to look like? So it's going to look like probably around these two workflows. It's going to be containerized, where you're going to want a platform that's ready for that. Probably going to require support for GPUs, right? So full support for GPUs. And of course, we're partnering with NVIDIA across GPU support, right? Available today. And you'll see more on this front, as the market evolves. So the ability to go and take those models is going to be pretty interesting. And I'll leave you with one last thought also, right? Is my daughter's a data scientist. So I've been talking about, like, how do we think the models will be developed? And what I think a lot of people look at, the cost of developing ChatGPT, for example, is over $100 million, right? With a team of dedicated data scientists. Not every company is going to be able to develop their own AI models, but they're going to want to run AI models that are developed and licensed by others. And so what you want to start thinking about is, how do I make sure I'm ready with a future-proof platform that's going to support the GPUs, support containers, as well as my traditional VMs? So that's where we're saying, listen, we can make you AI ready with a platform that can scale quickly for the applications as you go and determine that you'd like to go and deploy them, and give you the full data protection. That's where the enterprise, DNA of our customers comes in, because they're like, hey, it's not enough to put AI in. Like, I want to make sure I'm responsibly putting it in. I'm protecting the data. I've got a recovery plan in case anything happens. So that idea of having AI be assumed or assimilated into all of those other capabilities, really important element for us and our customers.
Wow. That was a great conversation, Lee. I really enjoyed sharing about your views and Nutanix's platform and solutions, and there's just so much to talk about. I definitely want to go back and give this interview a listen.
We covered a lot of ground, Wayne. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. But before you go, Lee, I want to ask you a bunch of questions to kind of get to know you a bit. So what would you say would be an alternate career path if not for your job in tech?
Oh, for me personally? I think that's a good question. I mean, I love my job in tech, I have to say, right? This is and part of it is because what I really enjoy is taking complex topics and making them digestible. So I think maybe a teacher might be an area that I think would be interesting.
All right. Well, I can totally relate. So resonate with that.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a professor as well, by the way, a long time ago.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. What's one software tool or product that you think is very well elegantly built, designed?
I've been recently impressed with Snowflake. We integrated with Snowflake and are announced recently that you can take Snowflake and do geo-distributed searches, queries, if you will, right? And one of the innovations there was that I can do the queries across distributed object stores. So for us, this would be our object storage, right? And the value was I didn't have to move all the data to a central place. So that really got my fancy, right? As you start thinking about data being more distributed across the hybrid multi-cloud environment, now it's like, how do I get more value out of the data without moving it all to a specific place? Particularly interesting when you're in the cloud, right? Because moving data out of a cloud, right, drives egress costs, right? So or egress costs. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and so I don't know, that one caught my interest because data is different from every other physical asset we know, where every other physical asset, right, it depreciates over time in value. Whereas data actually doesn't lose its value and may actually grow its value as you're able to apply new analytics to existing data sources. Kind of interesting thought, maybe a little too ethereal for this.
Never thought of it that way. Wow. The next one for you. Complete the sentence. I can spend hours doing.
Oh, music.
Oh,
I'm a musician. If I, yeah, I find there are a few things that I find playing music actually gives me energy, right? So that's how it's a hobby that you love.
Wow. Which instrument do you play?
I was classically trained trumpet player, but today I've been playing piano and a little bit of guitar, but not very well.
Really neat. That's cool.
It's fun.
Yeah, I play a bit of guitar myself, bass guitar.
Oh, cool.
The next one for you, complete the sentence. At a party or a conference, I'm the guy who.
Oh, I'm the guy who connects people, right? I bring people together. So that's one of my skills.
Really neat.
Yeah.
That's cool. The last question for you, where do you go? Oh, actually, yeah. Oh, well, in your role, you probably wear different hats, being a product guy, the tech guy, the marketer, maybe the finance guy, but maybe a trainer. Well, which of these different roles most resonates with you?
Well, I'd have to say that, I have a terrific team at Nutanix and, my team and others. And so the collaboration element of working together with the team is really fantastic. I mean, we win and, by having high integrity and trust across the team. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy, right? Is, how do you build teams? How do you tap into people's expertise? So I think that's, without that, I wouldn't be nearly as much fun. So for me, that's a really great thing to work with talented, top talented people at Nutanix has been a real delight.
Wow. Yeah, very connected to your previous response as well. It was great to have you on the podcast, Lee. Thanks so much for spending time with us and just sharing from your wealth of experience. There was so much to learn, so much to ponder, and really want to have you back once in a few months or so.
Count me in. This is really a lot of fun, Twain, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks to all of our viewers and listeners as well for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with Lee. Connect with him if you're interested to, get to know more about Nutanix or what he does or his interests. And definitely come back for the next episode here as well. Thank you so much for joining. And that's it for now. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.